life is hard. Right. Life is hard. Life should always be difficult, right? Because if it isn't, you're never going to go anywhere. Right. So it'll never drive you and it'll force you to get out of your comfort zone to do something new.
Welcome to the Cyber Health Podcast. I'm Steven Pirano, your host, and the podcast is a place where we interview people in the technology space, in the medical field. We like to get their story, share their journey, but ultimately we want to inspire you. And so I'm very excited to introduce my guest today in the studio. He's none other than Dr. Christopher Wong. He is an orthopedic surgeon. He specializes in foot and ankle surgery. Welcome to the podcast, Doc.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited.
I'm just curious, what made you pick foot and ankle? Do you have a foot fetish?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things where I always knew orthopedic surgery was what I wanted to go into. Most importantly, let me just say, no, I don't have a foot fetish in that regard. But the main reason why I went into foot and ankle was I always get this question. I'll just tell my patients flat up, it's because I don't like hands. Mm-hmm. Okay, and what I mean by that is that hand surgery is very detailed. I mean, all surgery is detailed, but hand surgery, every nerve is critical. And so for me, I just don't know if I had that ability, find those really tiny nerves and try to kind of reanastomose those and fix the vessels as you need to, say, salvage if somebody were to cut off their finger. So I ended up gravitating to foot and ankle just because it was the furthest thing away from the hands. But more so the fact that with foot and ankle, there is a breadth of pathology, and I'm talking about an extreme range of pathology. In orthopedics, most people don't know that orthopedic surgery is actually subspecialized into various body parts as well, as we all are. We're all trying to become experts at one specific area. And with foot and ankle, you can treat people from a various range of pathology, such as they have deformities you can correct, they have arthritic conditions that you can address, trauma. There's also sports medicine-related conditions as well that you can address. To some extent, you can do a little bit of oncology with the foot and ankle, but that probably should be actually sent out to a real orthopedic oncologist, which once again is another subspecialty of orthopedics. Wow. Whereas, say, if you went into total joints, for me, I wanted that wide scope of patients. So, that's why I went to foot and ankle, whereas just by contrast, if you were a total joint surgeon, you're pretty much just doing joints all the time. So that's the reason why I went into foot and ankle. And it definitely is not because I like feet, because I tell you what, if anything, it has turned me off from feet.
Oh, really?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we're going to bounce around a little bit in this interview. We want to get your background and how you got into medicine, of course. But sticking on this particular topic about feet, does it make a difference on the shoes you wear? Does it really make a difference?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And what I would say is that I think that comfort is such an individualized experience. Just because something's expensive doesn't necessarily make it better, number one. But, so many times shoes are basically created on a mold. And what that mold is that they decide to make their shoe of varies. And, for instance, when I wear one particular brand of shoe, I don't know if I want to, say the name, Nike, but they're a little too narrow for my foot. I guess I have a wide foot. So for me, I'm a little bit more comfortable in another brand. Whereas other people, they say, oh, those are the only type of shoes that I can actually wear. Right. So it's not a knock on any brand of shoe. It's just that everybody's foot is so different.
And speaking of shoes, your background is?
Yeah. Not in sweatshops making shoes or anything. Okay. Yeah. No, sorry. All right.
That's not what I was getting at, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. Right. No, so my background, what, like race-wise or what? Yeah. I mean, as you can tell, I'm part Cuban, and no, I'm just kidding. I'm Chinese. Nice. My dad,
Chinese.
Yeah. my father is from China, and
Nice.
my mother's from Singapore. So yeah, my mom's gonna kill me if I say this, but I believe she's 50% Malay and 50% Chinese. So if you do the math, then that makes me 75% Chinese and 25% Malay, or descendant from someone from Malaysia. It's funny whenever a patient asks me where I'm from, and I'm just like, oh, I was born here in South Florida. They're like, no. Where are you from, though? I'm just
Right.
like,
Where are you from?
yeah, that wasn't good enough.
Right,
Clearly,
right.
But yeah, so that's my ethnic background.
That's awesome. I asked you that in reference with the shoes because my soon-to-be wife is half Chinese, half Jamaican, and I'm just curious. Like, for example, in our house, we don't wear our shoes in the house. So do you follow these traditions?
Fair enough. So I never knew they were traditions, because when you're growing up and your exposure is that, well, this is the way that we do it in my house. Nobody explains to you, this is tradition. You have to. No. It wasn't a disrespectful thing or anything like that. It was a matter of, if I wore my shoes inside my house, my mom would get upset because I was bringing dirt inside the house, which meant that she had to clean it up. Because as a 5-year-old, you're not worried about cleaning up things.
Right.
So I have grown up in barefoot inside my house, and I still do it to this day. But that's an interesting thing. I'll share a little bit of backstory. My wife is Colombian, and in the Hispanic culture, at least in her culture, I mean, you're not supposed to go barefoot on tile, because apparently cold tile will get you sick. So, when my mother-in-law first came to see me walking around the house barefoot, no problems, and our tiles, can be cold with the AC and stuff, and
Sure.
I'm defying all medical knowledge at that point, not getting, I'm not getting struck with cancer right on the spot or anything like that. So, I tell my patients, so some of my patients assume that I'm going to get upset at them when they say, oh, well, I wear sandals or flip flops, or I go barefoot at home. I look at them like, listen, if I'm gonna get mad at you, then I'm a hypocrite, because full disclaimer, I go barefoot at home myself.
Wow,
yeah.
that seems like so foreign to me. I wish I could do that. We have to have outside shoes, inside shoes. We have inside broom, outside broom. Speaking of that, how often do you sweep? Are you a big sweeper?
Yeah. So I would say that I used to, before we moved out of our condo. And the reason was that after we moved from our condo, we had a slightly bigger home, and I had to work a lot harder to pay off the home, so I was never really at home that much, that much
Right.
to sweep it. But I have no problem sweeping, and we have small kids, so I spend about 90% of the time that I'm at home cleaning up, helping out my wife as much as I possibly can to do my part. So yeah, sweeping's not an issue. Yeah.
Let's take a step back and how did you decide to get into medicine? Let's
Sure.
talk about that journey.
Absolutely. Ever since I was a young boy. How it all started was that I always had this desire to, and it's going to sound so cliche, you're like, oh, I want to help people. But I really wanted to help people. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember on my med school interviews, or at least the mock interviews that we went to, and one of the questions they're always going to ask you is, why do you want to go to med school, right? And if you say the answer, which may be 100% genuine, of I just want to help people, they're going to look at you and say, well, you could help people by being a social worker. You could help people by working in a restaurant. You're helping people there, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, the main reason why I wanted to get into medicine was more so that I wanted to help people in a way that utilized what I felt were my strongest talents. And strengths, my strongest strengths, right? My talents, and that was, I was a good student. I had a very good understanding of biology, anatomy, and it just kind of made sense to me. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a pediatrician, and then I realized I just hate parents. So then I ended up, gravitating more towards orthopedics, and my background that helped lead me in towards orthopedic surgery. But overall, just in medicine, I think what's amazing about it is that it's one of the disciplines in which you can help somebody in an aspect in which they are, it's a source of probably, perhaps maybe their most frustration in the sense of what is going on, why am I feeling this way as far as my health is concerned, and therefore it was the way in which I felt that I might be able to help them kind of overcome that.
Nice. Now, are you good in math?
Stereotypical, of course. I mean, who isn't, right?
Well, my fiance, who's Asian, is horrible in math.
I know.
So that's not your. So you are good in math.
Yeah, you know. So what's interesting is that my mother, and I never had overbearing parents by any means. You know, my parents were they were so busy working just to provide, you know, a good lifestyle for my family, my brother, myself, that they never really were kind of, you need to become a doctor, you got to become an orthopedic surgeon, you got to be the best of the best. No, my parents were very understanding about things, and actually, I say this. What's interesting is that my mom never wanted me to become a doctor. Yeah, she actually she was always thinking you'd be a really good engineer, you know. But so yeah, the decision to become a doctor was kind of my own per se. I'm sure my parents are not upset that I became one.
Sure.
But it was never forced, which I thought was awesome, and also helpful in making me not kind of how do I say this, not kind of reject wanting to go into medicine or kind of rebel against that.
You talked earlier a little bit about medical school and some challenges to get into medical school. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, medical school. It's interesting. So I don't know if you know this, but I went to the University of Miami, which is, you know, here in sunny South Florida, and my last year of med school, I had the opportunity to serve on the admissions committee, and one of the things that you know, when you're in that path and that's kind of all that you've known as far as academically, you know, you go to school, you're like, hey, I want to go to medicine. Okay, you go pre-med career, et cetera. So a couple things. So just to dispel some myths that I learned through my kind of process, and God, it's been a long time. It's been about over 20 plus years ago now. But you know, pre-medicine is not a major. All right, there's no, you don't leave with a pre-medicine degree. You leave with a degree in whichever it is, but you follow a track to become, you know, or to go into the medical field or into that type of profession. So they're basic prerequisites in which you have to kind of complete, and you know, most people are kind of going into the biological sciences, chemistries, things like that. But, you know, I think more and more you're seeing that, at least towards the end of my medical school career, was that the typical applicant and the typical candidate that was accepted into med school was not your standard, hey, I'm going to go straight out of high school, go into college, do my 4-year degree in biology, and after that, apply to med school. No, we were accepting more, you know, people that had some life experience, whether it be, you know, having a career before, having a degree that was different than biology, you know, maybe like an English major that, you know, also took the prerequisites. So there's a lot of variety in it. I would still say that, you know, if you look at the numbers, sure, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are, you know, the traditional 4-year undergrad in a biological sciences type of, you know, discipline. But I think over the years you're seeing more and more people that have had more diverse experiences getting into medicine. Another thing that I learned was that from the admissions department was that people were calling on a daily basis, just, hey, you know, I'd like to start med school. How do I enroll? And it was one of those things where people maybe didn't know that you have to have a 4-year degree. You have to take something called the MCAT, which is basically the SAT to get into med school base. And you know, there were all sorts of things that would help your candidacy, as far as you have to have experience, you have to have, you know, research always helps to show that you're really interested in it. You got to be a well-rounded candidate, not somebody who's just, oh, I'm just going to study. You know, did you do any extracurriculars? Did you have any leadership positions while you were in school, and things of that sort? So it was basically like applying to college on steroids all over again.
Wow. And how challenging is the MCAT?
You know, it's... I would say that, and I may have a biased perspective on how medical education was as an orthopedic surgeon compared to maybe somebody who is, say, an internist or somebody who specializes more in kind of this area over here. But as far as how hard was the MCAT, I mean, it was challenging. It really forces you to think of things in a different perspective. There were. I remember it's such a blur because I wanted to forget it as quickly as possible. But there was a physical sciences portion, there was a biological science portion, there was a writing portion from what I remember, and there was maybe another one I forgot. But I remember it was 3 components, and then you had a writing score, and The issue was that it tested you on things that you would literally never ever use to become a doctor. So even if you didn't do well in your MCAT, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a bad doctor. But unfortunately, it's just kind of a way of weeding people out. And what I learned on the admissions committee when I served on was that, say for instance, they look at organic chemistry, and organic chemistry. I asked, do I use organic chemistry in my day-to-day? And the answer is probably not. No, the answer is a resounding definitely I do not. But what it helped you accomplish was kind of think spatially, in 3 dimensions. And it was more so a test of how do you think as opposed to, hey, do you know what a benzene ring is and how that's going to help you as a doctor? It was more so in terms of, hey, can you think of things in a 3-dimensional aspect? Do you have the spatial recognition and awareness to kind of process things? So it was more of accepting you based on how you think as opposed to what you knew. Remember the second day of medical school, and I had an awkward living situation when I went to med school, in the sense that I was waiting for a building to open that my parents had helped me acquire, and it was pre-construction. And as you know, construction Miami, they tell you it's going to be, you'll be ready to move, and in June of one year, and you're not moving in until about 2 years later, right? Because all the things happen. So my first year, we never really got a clear answer as to where you were going to be. So I was bouncing around. I was living in place. And the first place I landed in was I rented a room in this woman's house in Coconut Grove. Really sweet lady, and I just remember waking up at around 5 a.m, getting ready to go to class, and we had just been through the first day, which was kind of grueling and a little overwhelming. And I was just there looking at the mirror in that little bathroom, and I looked at myself and I'm like, I'm in too deep at this point. I can't back out. Right. I can't back out. I'm in too deep. I got accepted in med school. I already have the first half of the year's tuition down, and what I'm going to say, what I'm going to tell people if I don't want to do this. But no, I mean that's the only memory that I really have. But I would say that there really was never a doubt that that's what I wanted to do. I would say, as far as residency goes, the residency that I went to was such a great residency, in the sense that what I wanted out of it, we weren't known for being a very heavy academic institution where it's like, and I'm sorry, my chairman may not like this, but we were a very work-intensive program where we knew we had a job to get done. We're going to go do it. We're going to help people. We're going to fix things, and we're going to move on, right? So I think, if anything, that I'm going to remember from that was just the volume of work that we did, down in South Florida, just like anywhere. A lot of major interstates and things that are traveling at very high velocities, you're going to see some very bad trauma. So things that I remember are just the sheer traumas that I was part of, and as far as the care. The rendering of the care to those patients, and just some really horrific injuries that we saw down over there. So those are my memories. They're all fond, nothing bad, thankfully. And they for the most part all had great outcomes. So very pleased and blessed.
Nice. And what would you say is one of your favorite procedures to do?
Yeah. So I would say that, once again, going back to the fact that foot and ankle has a whole breadth of pathologies, for me, I like a little bit of everything. We've been working together for a very long time, right? So I've been at Memorial, or I started Memorial in 2014, so approaching 10 years this year, and I've been on trauma call ever since day one, basically.
Wow.
So
congratulations!
I know, right? So orthopedic trauma is basically you break a bone, kind of violent type injuries, that happen. For me, I'm not only just doing foot and ankle stuff. I am doing, things like distal radius, kind of bread and butter upper extremity procedures as well, even going up to the hip or going down to the hips per se and fixing hip fractures and stuff. So I would say if I had to pick a favorite though, just overall, I think in orthopedics is always fun when you get to nail a femur. And when I say that, I mean in the sense of, somebody comes in with a femoral shaft fracture, or they break the middle of their bone, and the way that we fix it is we put a metal rod that goes up the intramedullary canal of the bone, and it's always one of those gratifying operations where you leave and you're like, I did real work today. It's always fun. It's not like when I'm kind of not that there's anything wrong with like correcting somebody's hammer toe, but it really gives you a sense of accomplishment when you when you leave the OR and you may have a little bit of blood on your shoes, and you're just like, I fixed this person's broken leg. They came in broken bone. It's now straight and it's looking good. This guy's going to walk on it now. So it's always a good feeling. So, interesting story. My parents. So I grew up in South Florida, born and raised. Left South Florida for a little bit and realized, why would you ever want to leave South Florida? It's just amazing. So I came back down for med school, stayed for residency, did fellowship up in Tampa at the Florida Orthopedic Institute in foot and ankle, having been living in South Florida, so my parents, they were in the Chinese food industry, as I said, and they owned a restaurant that actually is right down the street from the hospital in which I'm at now. So I delivered Chinese food for them from my parents. I mean, just as every Chinese kid in a family whose family is in a restaurant business. So I worked as a dishwasher from around the age of legally I'm going to say 14 because I think that's how old you have to be, right? So yeah, 14 is when I started for sure, absolutely, right? And obviously I wasn't a full-time employee. I went to school, right? But on my weekends and stuff, my parents would say, hey, Chris, you got to come and you got to wash dishes. All right. Clean dish engineer, as I wrote on my resume when I was applying to college. So I was dishwasher, and once I got my license, then I upgraded to becoming a delivery driver, and I would drive all over Hollywood. And the interesting story is that I used to deliver Chinese food to Memorial Regional. I used to deliver to the medical office building. I used to deliver over to, it used to be Hollywood Medical Center, but now it's Memorial South in the area. And I used to deliver over there. And, and what's interesting, I delivered Chinese food for all throughout high school, when I had my license. When I would come back on my college vacations, I would come back and deliver Chinese food on my vacations, just because it was a nice little side gig. Sure. Just work when you want. It was like Uber before Uber, right? For me, or DoorDash before all that. And then when I went to med school, because I was here in South Florida, I would also deliver Chinese food when I was in med school on my times that I had my weekends that I had free, and even into residency. Wow. So I would deliver Chinese food in my intern year, and even up until my second year of residency. After that, it got a little bit too busy where I was like, I just physically can't stay awake, and it was dangerous, for me to do that. So I would deliver Chinese food up until then. And I remember that one time I delivered Chinese food this was my intern year, and I delivered to a pediatrics resident whom I knew, and I didn't know she lived up in Broward County. I figured they all lived in Dade County. So, sure. My parents' restaurant was up in Broward County. I delivered to her, and she opened the door and she looked at me, and I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? And she looked at me and she was like, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm not stalking you, and I literally also work for this restaurant here on the side. Times are tough. I gave her the food. But what's kind of a full circle moment is that I at some point was, kind of elected chief of orthopedics over at the hospital that, I deliver at. So it was kind of cool to be like, hey, I used to be the Chinese food delivery guy over here, and then now I'm like, chief of orthopedics, and stuff. So that was pretty cool. But it was watching my parents really, really toil and work as hard as they did, really kind of give you an appreciation for how hard it is to earn a dollar. Because my parents probably could have hired a manager or something like that. It would have cost them kind of a sum to do that. And they would have been around a little bit more, but I want them to know that I also understand that the sacrifice that they made in terms of why they worked so hard was to allow myself and my brother to basically achieve our dreams. And life is hard. Life is hard. Life should always be difficult, right? Because if it isn't, you're never going to go anywhere. Right. So it'll never drive you and never force you to get out of your comfort zone to do something new. Circling back also to, hey, how do you stay so humble? And it's so funny. I'm the person bragging about how humble I am, right? I mean, no, but it's one of those things where, for me, I feel like my upbringing coming up from, kind of a middle class family and always, being around people who are just like me, really helped to kind of keep me where I'm at. I still basically driving the same car I had in residency. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just because I'm cheap. I'm sorry.
Car's a car,
yeah,
right?
car's a car, right?
Agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, who was the better tipper, regional or south?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Doctors are just horrible tippers. Horrible tippers.
Is that because they never have cash? They're always in scrubs. Like, I don't have my wallet.
Well, so I mean, listen. Back then, this was before credit cards came out. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting. Like, my talking about technology on that front, right? My parents' business was largely cash only, and towards the end of their career, so my parents retired in 2010, but when they started, they literally only maybe did about, maybe 5 credit card transactions a day. And by the time that they were getting ready to retire, it had now been that they only did about 5 cash transactions per day. Everything else was, the paradigm completely shifted. And I mean, there was... There's a reason for that, obviously. Nobody wants to carry cash. I mean, see if you can even find cash, number one nowadays, right?
Sure.
But
I spoke to a couple people before today and told them that, I was going to have an interview with you, and they were just ecstatic, and I say this sincerely. From the time that I've known you, you've always been a stand-up guy. You show immense class in the operating room. I mean, you have procedures sometimes they're an hour, hour and a half. Sometimes you have more complex procedures that go for maybe a couple hours, but you never change your demeanor. You have great music. Everybody loves you in the operating room, from the anesthesia to the assistants to the orderlies. I mean, when someone hears, oh, we have an add-on case, who is it for? Dr. Wong, they're running to the room to help get it going. So I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you for being who you are in the operating room, and that's from the entire OR staff. What is it going through your mind when you look at your day, you're waking up, okay, you have 4 cases. Let's say one is a quick case, so to speak, and the next 3 are very complex, and you're going to spend all day in the operating room, and maybe you got a sick kid at home. You're juggling a lot of things going on, but you never change who you are. You never change your attitude, your temperament, the way you speak to people. You're always very kind. So where is that coming from?
So first, thank you very much for those compliments, and I will say it's always a lot easier to be nice to people when they're nice to you as well. So it's reciprocated. It really is. So I would say that's. There's a long-winded answer, and I'm going to give that to you because I think that it's important. And I'm going to say that first. Foremost, if we go all the way to the beginning, I think it starts with my parents, more so my grandmother as well. My parents were always working really hard, and my parents were in the Chinese restaurant industry. Stereotypical, I know, but they were in the Chinese food industry. and they were working really long hours. So my mother's mom, my maternal grandmother, was basically kind of my second mom. She came from Singapore, kind of very, very humble woman. So, and both my parents also very humble people as well. So I learned a lot of the humility from them per se, just more so observation, right? Nobody gives you a class on how to do that. You just kind of see it. And you really, kind of internalize and you say, okay, well, this is the way that, life is. We work hard to try to help each other. So that's part of it. I would be remiss to say that, as you said, when you wake up in the morning and you've got a long day and say you have a sick kid, how do you juggle all that? I would have to give thanks to my wife. My wife has been exceptionally, kind of, she is like the rock basically in our household, in the sense that she allows me to be able to be the person that I am. Not because she's Hispanic or anything like that, but she allows me to do that because she's taking care of the house, and she does such a great job managing our household that I don't have to worry about that. So therefore, I can come to work and I don't have all those stresses that maybe somebody else would have per se, if they kind of have a lot going on in their life. So I thank you a lot. I love you. Okay. What I would say is that just overall, nothing gets accomplished when people are getting yelled at, number one, right? I mean, I remember those times I might have had an attending or two that might have been a little bit more vocal and expressing his or her displeasure. If you get belittled, I mean, that doesn't make you want to work any harder. In fact, it just kind of pisses you off a little bit, right? And even then, it throws you off your game,
Sure.
right? And, the functions of the OR are so intricate and complex, and there's such a chain that I don't think a lot of people realize. One thing can happen over here that affects the downstream effect down over here through every, successive step. So, for me, I can only control what I can control, and what it is that if I bring a positive attitude, and for me, I'm a happy person. I'm blessed. I've got. I'm very happy to be an orthopedic surgeon, to be a physician, to live in South Florida, et cetera. I wake up every morning and I'm so happy to go to work, in all honesty, right? And the old adage, if you really love something that you're doing, it's not considered work, right? So I really do feel that, it's true for me. I walk into the OR and I'm happy only because I get to do what I love. And on top of that, I'm surrounded by extremely friendly people that we all have the same goal. And the goal is we want to help, the person who is going to be on that table. And we want to do it as quickly, but also more importantly, as safely as possible. So I think we all share a common goal and we work together towards that goal. There are bumps along the road, but at the same time, there's only so much I can control, and I'm not going to, kind of berate somebody or yell at somebody because, we always hear stories of that are going on, and it just doesn't accomplish anything. And I don't think that that's the right way to really treat people, because people deserve to be treated with respect, Right. And the same thing is with respect to my patients. I've got people that from all walks of life. When you take trauma call, you tend to see a certain subset of the population that may not, kind of have the same resources.
Sure.
Et cetera. And, I treat them all the same. I treat them all the same as I do, the so-called, VIPs, what have you. I mean,
Right.
I always tell my office staff, I'm like, I don't care if you're the crackhead off the street or whatever. I'm still treating you the exact same way that I would if you're the professional athlete. Everybody's
Right.
getting the same treatment. And the key is to make sure that treatment is first class, because everybody really deserves it.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. We do appreciate you explaining that, because there's still, I feel, some healthcare professionals and primary surgeons that don't get that, unfortunately. So we're hoping by this comments that maybe those people will see it and they can learn from it and grow. But if not, oh well, then they're wondering why their turnovers are so long. Okay, so moving forward, what do you love about the operating room?
And just go back. Maybe I shouldn't have used the word crackhead. I meant to say drug addict. Okay,
Yeah,
but listen,
on one drug.
No, absolutely. Yeah, listen. It is what it is. Okay. What do I love most? Yeah, So what I love most about the OR, I would say, is I get to meet a whole bunch of awesome people. And I would say that working together as a team, and not to sound cliche, this isn't like a Full House moment or anything like that. I mean, it's literally. I mean, like I go in there, I'm greeted by smiling faces every single day, and at the same time, you return that smile, and we're all there. It's the epitome of, kind of a team. And to go back, so I've got a sports background in the sense of, I played high school football, also did college football. Nice. But I mean, it's basically I've been parts of teams, my kind of the significant portions of my upbringing, per se. So as a result, it is the epitome of working together as a team. And realistically speaking, nothing that one person ever accomplishes is done without other people. That's just the way it is. Right. So I recognize that. I really do recognize that. And that is the best part. I get to meet all people that I might not have ever, our paths would have never crossed if I were, stuck in an office all day. Sure. Kind of going through my daily grind, just, listening to hearts and checking blood pressures and things like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right, and let's do the flip side. What's something you don't like about the OR? Something that gets you, bothers you.
Yeah, so I would say that it's the
excuse me.
So many times, and I don't want to say that this is what I hate. What I hate about the OR. Obviously nobody likes when there's change in the sense that, okay, we think we're going to start at a certain time, and 2 hours later we're just getting started. And as a result, listen, things happen. We get it. We understand, and I don't think anybody's doing it maliciously. At least not to me.
Right. Not to you.
Apparently not to me. Right? Thank you, everybody. But it's. I think it's just human nature that when you have an expectation, and unfortunately that expectation kind of deviates a little bit or gets kind of sidetracked or derailed, it's gonna create some kind of uneasy feelings per se. But once again, you control what you can control. I try not to let it bother me. I would say what I wish could be a little bit different in the OR, and that's probably something that maybe is my control. And maybe I'd say we'd all like to be a little bit faster in the OR, and myself included. I think that I wouldn't say that I'm a speedy fast surgeon as you and I know that there are people in our institution that are wicked fast, right? But at the same time, I don't think I'm the tortoise going on over here. Right. But I would say that the thing that maybe I'd like to improve upon in the OR is more so my efficiency in the sense of being able to kind of go home at a little bit more reasonable of a time, more so to kind of be able to be there and help out. And my wife hates it when I say help out, but more so kind of be the father, be the husband that I should be. Be there a little bit more, and at the same time, also, I always think about it in terms of, well, if I got a lot faster, what would I then do? I try to add another case, Right. So I ended up shooting myself in the foot one way or the other. Right. So, I don't know if you know this, Steve, but apparently I have a nickname at Memorial, and I've been told that I'm known as All Night Wong, only because I tend to kind of go into the OR we'll start early in the day, but unfortunately, just the volume of cases that we have, we'll end up working all night and stuff. So All Night Wong.
Really? I've never heard. I've been there 8 years. I never heard.
Yeah. So All Night Wong.
Must be the night staff.
Damn. Yeah, that's true. I've spent a lot of time with them, a lot of late nights and stuff with them. So they've affectionately deemed me as All Night Wong. Yeah.
So the dynamics in the OR are what you make of it, and of course, I would say, now, are you the leader in the OR, or is the anesthesiologist the leader in the operating room?
Yeah, I would say they're two. Okay. They really are, because I've always had this philosophy. I don't tell the anesthesiologist how to do anesthesia, and the anesthesiologist doesn't tell me how to do surgery. So I think that it's important that this isn't one of those things where my member is bigger than your member type thing. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, listen, this is my area. I understand this is what I do, most of the time, and I understand that you're on that side of the curtain or that side of the drape. And when I say that is that, in the OR, the patient's there and there's a drape that usually covers up kind of, the head, the neck area, especially in foot and ankle where I'm working down at the lower extremity. So, I'm on my side and then they're on their side. And, I don't really ever get into those types of, kind of competitions. For me, that's not important. The main goal or the main objective in there is to get what's laying in front of us off the table as quickly and as safely as possible, and effectively, being effective in our jobs and accomplishing what we set out to do.
Now, how does technology play a role in your day-to-day?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember those days when I started residency back in, this is now 2008, right? So I started my intern year in 2008. And even then, before I had hospital exposure to orthopedics back in 2006, 2005, if you want to call it. Excuse me. But just an example as far as how technology has affected us, just digital X-ray. It's a huge advancement over the past, 2 decades, transformed our lives because, back then, plain films, X-rays where you see them on they used to put them on a whiteboard, which was just a glowing, board. They'd put them up there and you look at the film, which was this heavy piece of, kind of, I don't know what the material was made of, but, you could see this grainy black and white grayscale image on there, and you had to try to pick something out. You could never adjust it if the exposure wasn't right that the X-ray tech did. You have to go and send the patient back for another X-ray. I remember that about 90% of my role as a student on those orthopedic rotations was helping out the resident to go find these X-rays because they were scattered all throughout the hospital.
Oh my God.
And literally, you'd have to go take one, look at the light board. Okay, take it down. That wasn't it. Okay, take it. Oh, okay, look at that. Find the correct X-ray. Find the correct one as far as the date, because in their hospital, they may be taking several X-rays on any given, on what during their hospital stay. So they may have like 5 or 6 different sets of X-rays. And you got to track down the right one, right? And there's only one copy.
Oh my God!
Yeah, right? And then after you got to lug around, you got to go different. And Jackson Memorial Hospital, where I did my residency, is such a big hospital that we had one central X-ray, one central reading room, but we had all these satellite ones as well. And 90% of my day was spent doing that. So having digital X-ray was like game changer, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, back then we also only had paper records, right? Paper records meaning that you get a patient chart, and literally the note is written. Right, you had to read whatever chicken scratch was done from the, from the previous doctor before you, and you're like, I don't know what this says, and it's just like completely inefficient. So they rolled out electronic medical record, right? And so now everything's electronic. Unfortunately, there are still some, kind of intricacies and details that, could always be improved upon. Not every electronic medical record system communicates with each other. So therefore, you see somebody at one hospital and that patient goes to a different hospital system, and you may not be able to see exactly what was done. So you're still relying on what the patient tells you, which may or may not be 100% correct sometimes. It's made our lives somewhat efficient, somewhat more efficient per se. Once again, what does it do to us? Once we become more efficient, now we have to find ways of trying to increase volume and become even more efficient, right? So, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. The jury's still out. I think that I've met other surgeons who were completely opposed to the conversion of paper records to EMR. It's just because when you've been used to doing something for so long, change. We fear change. We fear change. We have to do our paper records. I'm not doing that. EMR's worked for me my entire life. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to your new thing. So it's kind of like when the internet came out. How many people were like, I don't trust this internet thing, right? And all of a sudden it's like, I don't think anybody can live 30 seconds without looking back at their phone to see what's on TikTok or anything else. So.
And how do you think, we did talk about earlier before we had the cameras rolling, how AI and the different softwares are playing roles in
Yeah, AI, right? So that's the sexy term nowadays, right? And listen, I'm by no means a tech expert. I think it's so interesting, the whole technology space. I really do. And I think in my next life, I'd like to kind of, be a part of that. But as far as AI, I would say that the newest thing that's coming about is more so using AI to basically document a patient encounter. And what I mean by that is that, for instance, when you go see the doctor as a patient, your doctor is there. Hopefully they're able to kind of look at you in the face, or look at you in the eye, actually physically reach out, touch you, examine you, things like that. And after you leave the OR, after you leave the room, with that physician is either dictating or typing up or using a computer to generate a visit, meaning that they're documenting everything that happened during that time that you were there. And it's important for billing purposes, but more so for documentation. But really, it's more so for billing purposes because they got to submit that to prove that they actually did something. Otherwise, it's fraud. But as a result, what's coming out now is that AI programs are coming out in which they will basically be basically a fly on the wall in that encounter where they're listening to everything that's being said. And once you and the patient leave that room, they're actually creating the visit encounter, documenting everything that was said, documenting your plan, maybe sometimes even enacting that plan as well for you. Say if I said, "Hey, Steve, I want to order an MRI on your right ankle," it will somehow generate that order and send it out for me. So it creates efficiency in that regard. I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly what other problems that will open up, because I'm sure it will. Knowing humans, it will open up some other can of worms that, say, another Pandora's box of some sort. But that seems to be kind of what's at the forefront. I'd like to go back to when you asked about how technology impacts me, and I would say I want to talk about more so. I mean, you invited me on as an orthopedic surgeon, so I'm going to talk about how technology has impacted us as orthopedic surgeons, and I will say that so much about orthopedic surgery is all about technology, right? I mean, you have to make advancements in the field every day. There's new implants coming out. There's new ways of fixing things. And one caveat I want to say is that newer doesn't always necessarily mean that it's necessarily better. Right, newer just means that it's newer and it's a shiny new tool or shiny new instrument that you can play with per se, but it doesn't always necessarily mean something's better, that you're going to get any better outcomes. So I really would recommend that any surgeon, whether it's orthopedics or any other discipline that's out there, really kind of doesn't get sold into using something just because it's new and I think we need to kind of see long-term data and long-term follow-up to see how these patients do with it before we kind of really go full scale on there, and maybe that's a whole nother interview. You can have somebody with that's part of that type of industry. But there is true danger in doing something kind of still in its experimental stages. I believe. I mean, you could look back and say at some point metal on metal hips seemed like a great idea. Right. We know how that went, right? Right. And I would be surprised that a lot of things that maybe I'm even doing now, right? Maybe there's only 10-year follow-up on those things, and we still don't know what's the long-term effect of that yet. The physicians that were doing metal on metal at the time, we're given this information and we can only use the information that we're given, and at some point there has to be a patient zero, right? There has to be, right? That's the way that things happen. Even in experimental trials, there's got to be a patient zero, right? But I do think it's important that patients also be made aware that perhaps something new is going to go in them that may not necessarily be kind of, have the long-term data, et cetera, associated with it, or a new procedure, maybe perhaps more importantly that a new procedure is being done that may not have long-term data out there. But, it's all about, making patients as empowered as they possibly can to make the right decision, what's best for them. I would say that what's changed in my practice is that, a patient will come to me and they'll say, "Doctor, I trust you 100%. And, whatever you need to do, go ahead and do." I'll look at them and I'll say, "Listen, I think blind trust is something that you really need to reconsider. And while I'm honored and that's the way you feel, but literally I'll tell patients, you don't know me, like literally more than the 30 minutes in which we've, met, and I appreciate, kind of the blind trust that you're giving me, but also, where else in your life do you do that? Because that's maybe not a good idea. Think about it. My goal and my job, I would say, is that I try to empower my patients as much as possible. But I would say that almost all my patients, when they leave my office, they don't ever say, "Hey, Dr. Wong didn't spend enough time, with me," right? they're going to be mad that they waited for a while. I will say I hear that all the time, but usually it's for a good reason. I'm not there sitting having a coffee while everybody else is just waiting in the room. I'm there. I go from one room, and then after that I go to the next room just to But I want to make sure that when I leave that room that everybody knows what they're getting themselves into, what their issue is at hand. I spend a lot of time trying to educate them, because how many times do you leave a doctor's office and you say, I have no idea what they just said? Right. And for me, I have the advantage of doing things that are physical. Right. Maybe it's a little bit harder for, somebody trying to explain to you why is your blood pressure so high, right? Why is your diabetes so uncontrolled? And that might be a concept that's not easy to grasp. Listen, for orthopedics, I've got x-rays, I've got pictures. I can show them and say, listen, this is what's going on over here. I got Google where I could say, hey, Google, show me a normal this. And then I could say, look at yours. It doesn't look like this one, does it? So that's another reason why I went into orthopedics also. For me, it just made sense. It was physical. It's a lot easier for my Neanderthal brain to kind of wrap around. So that's why I went to ortho.
Now, do you think, finishing up with technology, do you think robotics would ever play a role in foot and ankle?
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of sexy talk out there about robotic surgery, and while I think that there's some advantages to it, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean there may be a little bit of misconception out there where patients don't understand that there's still a human that's in control of the robot. It's like there's no autonomous OR that I'm aware of in which, you come in, you let a robot do your anesthesia, intubate you, put you to sleep, put your IVs in, obviously IVs first, and then, a robot cleans your leg, sits your leg, drapes you, and then the robot is just doing the entire operation. Will we get there? Who knows, right? Elon, where are you at on this one, right? I would say that the misconception is that there still is a human that has to control it. I don't do any robotic surgery only because, at least at this point, it's not really available in the foot and ankle space per se. Could it get there? It's possible. I would say that for those looking to go into a career in orthopedics, because I know that there may be some of you out there that are kind of making that decision. I would say that orthopedics is a field in which I at least for the foreseeable future, there always has to be some sort of human component to it. So I think there's always going to be a little bit of job security in that regard. And at the same time, who potentially wants to, I don't know if this is like iRobot or anything like that, wants to give up control to a machine, the entire time. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I would say that I've always been a little bit kind of weary of when people say, oh yeah, do you like full self-driving on on this vehicle? And I'm just like, listen, if I'm going to get into an accident, I kind of want it to be my fault then, if that's the case. There's just so many variables. I don't know. Maybe like I said, maybe I just want a little bit more kind of long-term data. Sure. I want to see that things are tried and true. I want to make sure that it's safety. Safety is key before I kind of do that. So from a foot and ankle perspective in orthopedics, I would say as of right now, I don't know of any robotic stuff that's being done. Technology is being useful in the sense that there's a lot of 3D printing that's going on. So it's not all robots and stuff as far as in the operating room, but 3D printers are in fact making 3D implants. There is a 3D printed talus, which is the talus is a bone that sits between the tibia and the heel. It's basically your ankle bone, right, or one of your ankle bones, right? And what it is, it's a very special bone in that it has 3 joints. It joins with the tibia, it joins with the heel bone, and it joins with a bone called the navicular, and it allows for up, down, side to side, and also kind of a torsional type of motion. And the problem is that sometimes these bones die. Right. And when these bones die for whatever reason, whether it be trauma or some sort of, kind of blood disorders like sickle cell or, other kind of vices that patients may have, it's a pretty significant problem. So, the kind of the gold standard per se has been, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to fuse it. Right. Or if we can. Right. And that involves, kind of basically taking a bunch of bones and making them form one solid bone. So in essence, the person basically has like a peg leg that they're walking on. They still got their leg. It might be a little bit shorter depending if you have to remove the bone entirely, whether you could put a substitute in there, such as like a femoral head allograft, which is what I mean by that is, we use body parts from cadavers that have been cleaned, and we're just using their bones as a scaffold. But you can then put it in to kind of make up for the void. And the problem when you fuse is that now you've got somebody that's still, like I said, they have their foot, they have their leg. I'm sure they're going to be grateful for that, but it's a very difficult life as a result. They're kind of limping on there, and that's maybe not. It's not the worst thing, right? It's just one of those things you have to assess. Every patient, has to assess their situation and figure out what's best for them. But there's another option out there. At least it's right now. It's a total talus. Where they, we would remove the diseased bone and you put basically a metallic version of it in there. Is long-term data there? No. I mean, it's one of those things where I also say to myself, okay, well, what is, you also have to kind of think about what's plan B. If this turns out that this was a bad idea, what's plan B? Okay. And as long as plan B sounds like a viable option and something that can always still be done, I'm a little bit more willing to adapt that technology or that procedure, per se. At least what's Plan B as far as well as I can think it out.
Right. Sure.
But yeah, unfortunately, this is on the internet, so there's going to be forever. So we'll
So
see what
speaking
happens.
of that,
yeah.
this is how we're gonna wrap it up here with technology, like you just said. This could be on forever, perhaps. And you have 2 children, you mentioned.
I have 2 children. Yes.
2 boys.
Boy and a girl.
Oh, boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl.
Nice.
Done. Everybody. Yes.
Done. So let's say they're growing up and they're at that age where they're looking at careers and they see this video. Is there any message you want to leave them, or to inspire them, or?
Yeah. I would say that first and foremost, I want them to know that I've tried everything that I possibly could to be there for them, even though, they may only see me a few hours out of the day, and I am away not because I want to. I love my job, but ultimately on my deathbed, I don't think I'm ever going to look at anybody and say I wish I operated more. Right? I'm going to say I wish I spent more time with my kids. Right. But the reality of the situation is that, as any human being, I have to be able to provide a life for my family, to kind of put a roof over their head, put food on the table, et cetera. And the way in which I chose to do so is to be a physician, be an orthopedic surgeon specifically. So it does involve a lot of long hours because my work is physical in the sense that I can only accomplish so much in a given day, and takes time to do certain things to help people as best as I possibly can. So unfortunately, I am away a little bit more than I would like to be, but I still make as much of an effort to be there when I can. So that I want to say that, if I was never there for them, I want them to know that I did it only because I love them, and I didn't do it for personal reasons, number one. Number 2, going more so on the fact that, I think orthopedics is an amazing field, and I think that, I get the opportunity to really, kind of help somebody directly, and when I say I also mean that, there's a team of people behind me as far as everybody in my office who's helping them get through the door, things like that. People in the operating rooms, whether it be at the hospital or the surgical centers that I operate at, that are also helping them as well. So it's an amazing career to have. It's not meant for everybody. I will say that you have to be able to stomach certain things. You've got to have, kind of no aversion to blood, because there's a little bit of blood, that happens. You've got to be able to kind of, kind of understand that, somebody is trusting you with their life when they're going to go under the when they're going to go under anesthesia to have something done. So there's a lot of trust involved with that, and if I don't think I ever want to push my kids one way or the other to do what they want to do. I think that thank God I'm in a career that provides a kind of a comfortable lifestyle. It's great as what it used to be, but listen, it's a comfortable lifestyle, thank God. And I want my children to be able to kind of do what, as cliche as it sounds, I want them to do what they love, so they can also one day sit in front of somebody like you and say, yeah, if you do what you love, it's not considered work, and for me, that's been my passion. I never want to sway them kind of one way or the other.
You want to give any shout outs that helps you get through the day? Like you couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, I want to single out anybody because that would be unfair, and I'd be missing a whole bunch of other people in the process. But we work together as a team. Whether it's the person who's literally answering my phones at the office, versus medical assistants who are there, kind of helping remove sutures and putting on casts and stuff while I'm running off to another room to go say hello and speak with another patient. At home, my amazing wife Viviana, she's been, like I said, a rock. My children Oliver and Valeria, they are always a joy and a pleasure to come home to because they're 6 and 4. We'll see what happens when you turn 16 and 14. But right now, I still love coming home. Parents, who I live very close to them, so they're always willing and able to run at the drop, at the run over at any call to come and help my wife out with the kids, so I don't have to worry about that. So I really thank them for that. Father's Day is coming up tomorrow, so happy Father's Day, Dad. I love you. I love you, Mom, too. My mother-in-law, who she lives in Colombia, and she will come over whenever my wife needs, really at the expense of my inability to be there sometimes. So I really thank her for that. And the list of people, like I said, even though your interview is with me, I want to say that that there's a whole army of people behind me who have helped me get to where I'm at, and that also includes the physicians that have helped me mature as a physician through my whole process. Everybody that I've encountered through med school, undergrad, my football coaches, my teammates, etc. Right, God, right, all that stuff. So I mean, it's been a kind of a team effort, I will say, and I really appreciate everybody, and even my coworkers, the co-surgeons. My other orthopedic colleagues that are in the community and stuff too, that if they have something that they want to send to me, I really thank them for referring those patients over to me.
Somebody needs to perhaps find you. Maybe they're having some foot issues. What would be the best way someone to contact you if they need help?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.oasb. That's Orthopedic Associates of South Broward.net. And on there, our contact information is there. My office number is listed on there as well. And, unfortunately, I am one person, so it does take a little bit of time to get into the office. I'm trying to work on that. But if it's an issue that is something that can wait a little bit, we're going to do our best to get you in. If you have an acute emergency, I suggest you go to the ER. Right. Go to the ER. Okay, right. And get treated by the best person you possibly can as quickly as possible. But if there's anything that we can do to help you out, we're always happy. And we have other specialties at our office as well, including sports medicine as well as spine. So
nice.
Anybody who needs those issues, we're always happy to help.
There you go, everybody. If you need any help with your feet or your hips or what else can we?
Yeah, feet, hips, knees, total body, shoulders. I got some great people in my office that'll be able to help them.
There you go. Mm-hmm. And this was the Cyber Health Podcast. Again, I'm Stephen Perano, your host. We appreciate you watching and following us. And for those who are listening on Spotify and iTunes, we do appreciate your continued support. We only ask that you just share this video with as many people as you can. We do appreciate you watching, and thank you, Dr. Wong, for coming here.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I've seen a couple of your videos so far, and it's all great work. And I'm proud of what you've been able to accomplish thus far, and I know that you're going to go really, really far with this. And I know this is not the end. So
this is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, of course.
Take care, guys. We'll see you on the next episode.